Okay, this is a long form version for YouTube on what turbochargers do with altitude. Also, when dealing with intercoolers, things get different because there's some correction things you have to do with the intercoolers, and there's a really easy, kind of simple way to handle that, and we're just going to correct off of a sea level scenario. It's not perfect, but this is just for showing what's occurring. If you're like, and even still, like, plotting a compressor map is technically like an imperfect thing because you never ever have like this exact conditions, like minute to minute. Like it's different every day. So like, don't get too hung up on the perfectionism of this stuff, right? We're not on a gas test stand with perfect input conditions to get this set up exactly right. All right, so constants is 5.9 liter Cummins turbo diesel engine, 70% volumetric efficiency at 2200 RPM. That gives us a normally aspirated CFM of 160 CFM. Post intercooler IAT, we do not care about temperature coming out turbocharger. We care about the temperature because the mass is the same through the entire system because you can't get rid of the mass. We're just going to read the motor only knows, ingesting wise, what the temperature of the air is at the intake valve. So we're going to just say it's 120 degrees. That's 0.068 pounds per cubic foot. The motor is going to make 30 pounds of boost in all scenarios. We are using a S366 SXE turbocharger. It's the closest map I had that hadn't been drawn on yet. So we have Oakdale, California, 141 feet, 78% humidity. It's 45.8 degrees right now. Station pressure is 30.18. It's 40.73. It's 14.7 psia. That gives us 0.0785 pounds per cubic foot. And at 30 pounds of boost, that gives us 47.7 psia, or 3.04 PR. That's 30 plus 14.7 divided by 14.7. So that's set. Now we're going to go Flagstaff, Arizona, 6,909 feet, 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 44% humidity. Comes out to a base of 0.05988 pounds per cubic foot. Remember, in Oakdale we have 0.0785 pounds per cubic foot. We have a station pressure of 23.18 inches AHG, which equals 11.38 psi absolute. So 11.38 plus 30 divided by 11.38 gives you 41.38 psi absolute, which is a 3.63 PR. And then I found this place called Bridgeport Peak, something like that. It's 10,532 feet with a station pressure of 20.7 inches of mercury. I say it's inches of mercury, even though it's HD, kilograms, which comes out to 9.96 psi absolute. So it's 9.96 plus 30 divided by 9.96 gives you a 4.0 PR, or 39.96 psi absolute. Now, to keep things simple, because we're using this corrected number with the intercooler, what we're going to do is find our air weight here, and then as we go up in altitude, we're going to take our absolute numbers, which is what the motor actually cares about, and find the percentage changes in air density because of the loss of total pressure at the motor. It makes things make sense. So for starters, what we will do is we'll take 3.04 times 0.068. That gives us 0.222. Gives you 0.21, but we're just going to use 0.22 because it's already did all the math for stuff, but that's the number. So what we do, so like I said, you just take the PR times the way they are after the intercooler for your sea level scenario, and that gives us 35.53 pounds a minute of airflow. Now, it's 160 times the weight of the air after the intercooler, and that's what the motor sees. How that plots out is this purple dot. Don't mind this one, it's this one. Going to go up to 3.0 PR over to 35 pounds a minute, and that lands us right here on this map, which is 70, or no, it's very inefficient island, 66% efficiency. But we're not talking about efficiency, we're just talking about shaft speed at this point. So that's about 430 ish meters per second tip speed. We're going to go over that towards the end of the video. So now, as we drive, the green is Flagstaff. So as we drive up to Flagstaff, we're going to go this way. So the PR is going to go up because our base pressure is going down, and we're still holding 30 on the gauge. But the flow is going to go down. And what gets weird is if, like, you can't just go and take 3.63, multiply it by 160, multiply it by 0.068. This is where you have to consider the weight of your base air that's being multiplied. The easiest way to do this, outside of some bigger equations, is we're going to take the 41.38 psi absolute, divide it by 47.7 psi absolute. That gives us a 0.86 something number. You take the 0.86 something number, and then you I'll say divide it by 0.22. Let me just double check real quick. 0.837 divided by 0.22 no, times. It's going to be a multiplier. 0.837 times 0.2. Yeah. So what you're going to do is you're going to take you take 41.38 divided by 47.7, and that gives us a 0.86 number. You take the 0.86 number, multiply it by our base value of the 0.222, and that gives us 0.193. That's 13.3% less. Because remember, the motor actually cares about is this absolute number, not the pressure rate. The pressure ratio is telling us how many atmospheres the turbocharger is working up to. So it's taking 0.05988 pounds, compressing it 3.63 times, but you have to also factor in the temperature of the air after the intercooler. And this is kind of seems to be the best kind of average way to do this. So that gives us 0.193 pounds. So it's what you're going to do. Now that this is all figured out, and that was easy from here, you just go 160 CFM times 0.193. That's going to give you 30.88. So we'll come back over to here. We go 3.6, come over, and right here is 30.88. So if we look at our tip speed's about 500 meters per second right here. So we gained speed, right? Went from 430 to 500. What did I write down? 470. Yeah, 430 to 470 meters per second. So that's all. If we just drove from Oakdale to Flagstaff and we maintain the same boost pressure all the way there, this is what you would average expect to see the turbocharger do. Your drive pressure is going to go up. There's all kinds of other external factors that are going on, but we're just going over how shaft speed's functioning. Now, let's say we kept driving from Flagstaff all the way to Bridgeport Peak. What we're going to do is do the same thing, process over again. 9.96 plus 30 divided by 9.96 is 4.0 PR. So that's absolute pressure of 39.96 PSI absolute. So we're going to take 39.96 divided by 47.7. That is a 16.31% difference, aka get 0.837 7, I think, and then multiply that by 0.222. That's going to give us 0.1858 pounds per cubic foot. 0.1858 pounds per cubic foot times 160 gives us 29.72. Not as bad of a loss as you would think, but the loss of pressure isn't as extreme, from 6,000 to 10,000 as I thought it would be. But what that looks like is if we started in Oakdale and we drove to Flagstaff and then we drove to this peak, we'd end up here. So that's a 4.0, and that's 29. So if we kind of look at where our tip speeds are landing here, we're somewhere in the 500-ish range. So we went from 430 RPM in Oakdale to 500 500. I wasn't at 500. 500 meters per second at the top of this hill. So what that means is this is not a burst region for this particular turbocharger, but say we were on a smaller turbocharger, or this particular turbocharger was on a bigger engine, or we were turning the motor at a higher RPM, you could easily go from, say in Oakdale we're here, and we drive up to this place and we end up here, right? You'd expect now we're playing in a metallurgical region of the turbocharger where the turbocharger may blow itself to smithereens. The other thing that can happen, like this looks unlikely, right? Like you're not going to go down the road it is a 5.5 PR. So but you do a bigger motor at a lower PR, you end up over here, and as you go in elevation, you end up going backwards, but you also end up going up past these speed lines like so. So you can end up going from, say, 560 meters per second right here, and you go up, and now it's 600, 650, and you're only at a 3.8 PR right here, but now you're at like 650 meters per second, and then the thing's going to metallurgically come apart. Oil film wise, your oil films are going to get very, very hot, but typically speaking, as long as clearances are correct, you generally aren't going to have like an oil film problem. You should have, ideally, is you should have compressor burst. That is the ideal situation in which everything was tuned up tip top and working correctly, and like all your clearances are all correct. The thing that should happen is it should just pull the compressor apart. That's what these lines are for. It's essentially showing you kind of safety line. This is what the speed is doing on the test stand, but this is the reason they only go out this far. Is this is the safe region. More so, the safe region is this. Let's see, what would it kind of look like? Probably something along the lines of probably around like this, and then up off the page like this way. Like this is the danger zone. Probably to here-ish is what you're kind of looking at. So what are these speeds as far as what are the RPMs? I didn't look up whether Borg-Warner Airworks is using the inducer or the exducer for the tip speed number. That's what this is. So the URED C equals 560 meters per second. That's tip speed. I just didn't look up which one it was, but that's 521 meters per second, 591, 460, 420, 370. That's what these lines are denoting. And these are your efficiency islands. So we're not talking about efficiency. Who cares about efficiency right now? Just tip speed. If we use the 66 millimeter part and we correct it to RPM, 430 meters per second comes out to 124,430. 470 meters per second. So Flagstaff comes out to 136,005, and then the big old mountain comes out to 500 meters per second equals 144,686. So if they are using the 66 mil side, we pick up about 20,000 RPM going from Oakdale to the top of this mountain if we hold 30 pounds of boost on our gauge, and 2,200 RPM on 5.9 liters. Yeah, all these inputs that we're pretending are static when only some of them actually are. If they're using the 96 millimeter part, which it's hard to say which one without just Googling it real fast, which I should have probably done for the video. The 96 millimeter part looks like 85,546 RPM at 430 meters per second, 93,504 RPM at 470 meters per second, and 99,472 at 500 meters per second. All in this particular case, this turbocharger is not going to explode. It's not going to function here, but it's also not going to explode at any of these points. But like I said, if you did have a particular unit that was functioning, say like you kept increasing engine speed or increased engine displacement, even though you're, let's say, a lower PR and you're heading up these places, you can easily put the compressor into compressor burst. Likewise, if the bearing system just so happens to not be properly set up, you can also again end up in compressor burst. The torsional loads, both compressor wants to fulcrum the rest of the shaft based off the out of balance. One direction, out of phase, wherever it's out of balance. The turbine wants to fulcrum from its bearing the compressor side in a bending moment as well. The faster you rotate these, the more that motion excites itself. Now there are videos that display this in extreme detail in which it's not realistic, right? Because it kind of looks like a S curve. They don't S curve. This would be, they literally cannot call shaft tilt, bearing tilt. They can't actually get this extreme. That's very, very small numbers, but it doesn't take a whole lot of actual called shaft or bearing tilt for the films to basically go haywire. When the films go haywire, because the load zone is now on a very edge of a bearing and not across the bearing, you lose load support and stuff hits it. But these are all things that shouldn't be occurring. I said you should just blow the compressor part. Ideally, that's what should happen if everything's good. If everything's not good, you end up with these other bearing things. And sure, that can happen. I've found some OE stuff that would probably have that issue. More so, you end up with bearing issues with like static temperature, like sustained temperature kind of stuff. It's more or side hilling and hills and static load, constant temperature stuff seems is much more of a thing than speed. But I do set them up different for like really high speed and low speed, but the difference those are very small. But hopefully that kind of shows how this works. I know it's a little bit complicated, but that's kind of what's going on. Like I said, as this is occurring, right, the PR is going up, so the turbocharger is working harder by a factor of the PR to compress a thinner atmosphere up to a higher number of atmospheres. So your drive pressure is going to follow that as well as you go up. And as the drive pressure goes up, you end up with more CO2 and exhaust stuff still left in the chamber, as well as your pumping losses go up. So combustion efficiency is going down because of these contaminants in the chamber, as well as the system starting to act like more and more like it has an exhaust brake on it. That's why you end up with EGT limitations at some point as you go up in altitude with a certain size turbocharger. Yeah, it's like a lose-lose as you go up in altitude. You lose on the compressor has to work harder, as well as what the motor gets from what's being compressed is also less. That's why the design of compressors actually changes as you go up in higher and higher altitudes. When you look at aircraft compressors, they're shaped like really old style compressors, but they're not shaped like an old style compressor because it's old. They're shaped like that because the only way you can essentially create atmospheres without blowing the thing apart. If you designed it like an automotive compressor, it would spin so fast and you would get so low ROI on that as far as compressing goes. It'd be a waste of time essentially. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I covered how altitude works. I mean, the heating's going up, right? Like 3 OPR to 4 OPR, like your compressive heating is higher. Like everything just is a negative with altitude. So even turbochargers are great altitude correction devices, but it's still not a perfect system. So, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.